Every real estate investor has different properties, a different portfolio, and a different strategy around that portfolio. What works for one person may not work for another person, but what we will share is that we got started. And today I'm joined with my great friend, co-worker, future BPCon speaker, and amazing investor, Danielle Daly. She's a really amazing house hacker. She's a really amazing operator at house hacking and is up in Denver, Colorado. So today I want to turn back the clock a little bit and ask Danielle how she got started. So Danielle, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great after that intro. Can you please give me that intro every time I'm just, having a bad day? Just have that in the background.
I really wish I could. And like I said, we're going to be on the rookie panel together at BPCon coming up here. So I'm really excited to share the stage with Danielle, who's just been an absolute rock star in our space. So Danielle, could you just turn back the clock a little bit and just tell us who you are and how you got started in real estate?
Working at BiggerPockets has definitely helped spearhead things for me to get started, but they don't do the work for you. I definitely came into this role having interest in real estate like 4 years ago. I actually went to get my real estate license when I lived in Florida, just kind of stumbling around, figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided to go on that venture. And as soon as I finished the course, I actually got an offer to move to Colorado from one of my best friends. And I was still a little bit iffy about becoming an agent, so I decided to just make that leap. And as soon as I did, everything worked out. And I got the job at BiggerPockets and realized I could invest instead of becoming an actual agent, which I definitely prefer.
So it sounds like, we looked at the transactional side of things with sales and said, I'm going to actually go work for the biggest investor community in the US. And BiggerPockets, I'm sure, provided you an amazing education. And within that education, the term that I'm sure you and I both stumbled upon at a very young age was house hacking. And that strategy is what you decided to dive into. And can you tell me why that was a strategy that you thought I can really propel and exceed in here?
Definitely. So I didn't even know what house hacking was until I started working at BiggerPockets. But going back to my time in Florida, I was the house hackee of two of my friends. So I actually lived with two of my best friends for a span of about 2 years, a year and a half with one of them, half a year with the other. And I paid pretty cheap rent and got to live in their room. For one of my friends, it was their house, and the other, it was their apartment. And I realized it was great for me. I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. But then I also thought, oh, wow, this must be fantastic for them too, because they weren't even looking to necessarily rent the room. It was just sort of falling into place. Like, I needed a room, we're best friends, wanted to live together, and it worked out. But that kind of spearheaded things for me as far as realizing, well, all right, I could do that, but be on the other side and own something and rent to other people and not pay rent at all. So that's sort of what got me interested.
That's really exciting because I haven't heard many people actually be the tenant in a house hack and say, I want to go and be the landlord of this now. But you obviously saw the benefit of what your friend was doing and thought, hey, it's not that hard. And it's a potentially little baby step here into property management to cut my teeth and really learn the trades. So can you tell me what you were looking for your first house hack?
Yeah, so before I actually started looking for the house hack, just to give some insight, I had no idea what I was doing. I was not looking for a house. If you would have told me 3 years ago that I would own 2 properties right now, I'd be like, you're absolutely joking. There's no way. I don't even know how to mow a lawn, let alone how to operate anything in-house. It's just not my specialty at all. And I'm not handy. I can be. I'm scrappy, but I'm definitely not a handy person. So really what got me started into this is moving to Colorado and realizing how expensive rent is in Colorado. So sorry for those of you wanting to move here. It's expensive, but it's definitely not cheap to live. So I realized, okay, what if I started kind of saving for retirement through real estate while living for free? That was my mindset, is I could get a couple properties. They're going to hopefully be worth double in 30 to 40 years from now for my retirement. I'm making myself sound really young. Let's call it 30 years. Yeah, that was kind of my thought process. So once I started looking, the first thing I did was go to meetups because I had no idea what to look for. Can I afford a 4-bedroom, a 5-bedroom? Can I just get a 2-bedroom? You have to really go to meetups in your local area to figure out what a realistic buy box is for you, depending on where you live. So that's really where I started.
That's so funny because you and I actually met at a meetup, ran into each other and say, hey, I work at BiggerPockets. Hey, I work at BiggerPockets, and that's actually how you and I met, and now we're on a panel together here in the future. We're active house hackers together, so I can really attest to the power of networking at these local real estate events. So Danielle, you found that first property. Can you tell me the numbers on the house hack for rent? And were you breaking even? Were you taking a little bit of a hit, or was this a pretty good deal right off the bat for you?
My first house hack is pure gold, in my opinion. So I was told at meetups that you don't cash flow In Colorado, you more so bank on appreciation. And so I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to cash flow. So I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I realized that I needed 5 bedrooms compared to 4, at least personally. The numbers were not working at 4 bedrooms. It's really basic math. I don't think too much into it. Just get all of your utilities together. You expect the mortgage to be, factor in potential property management in the future, though I planned to manage this property and I still do. So just factor all your expenses in there, maybe some CapEx, maybe a little bit of maintenance, which I personally didn't necessarily calculate for the first property because I knew I'd be living in it and managing it. All in all, that house, the mortgage, my North Glen house, my first house, is $3,100, right around there. And what I realized is I can get anywhere from about $850 to $900 per room, even upwards of $950, actually, depending on the seasonality. So realistically, I could be making, let's call it $4,500 if I'm renting out all of the bedrooms, all 5. So when I was living there, I was cash flowing maybe anywhere from $100 to $300 while I was taking up one of the rooms. But I did my math based on me not living there, on me buying another property and moving out. When I left the property and bought my second house, I now cash flow around $1,000 on that property. So it's doing really well. And, one day I'll be able to refinance and maybe even make more. So yeah, it's a solid property.
An absolute home run for the first one. That's so awesome, Danielle. So this is where our stories start to differ now because we are active house hackers. Well, I say I'm an active house hacker, but I actually just moved out of my second house hack and we'll be looking for the third one. And you're in your second one now, but our stories differ a little bit here because you've actually scaled bigger than I did in the beginning. I house hacked a condo, had 2 roommates, and down in Colorado Springs, I was renting $750 a month. So I was breaking even about $150 on mine as well. So we're very similar, but you're obviously the bigger scale here. I think a really big fear that a lot of people have, and that I definitely had at the time, was, I don't want to give up too much of my privacy. I can let 1 or 2 people into my private residence, my primary residence here. You have 4 strangers in your house. Can you tell me how that screening process is and how you have been just an absolute rock star at finding tenants? Because I know that this is the biggest fear that a lot of us first-time house hackers do have.
I would say Rockstar is very generous. I am doing my best. I'm just out here trying, just out here doing what I can. But as far as living with people, I do want to touch on that really quickly because I actually think that house hacking is really glorified when we should be talking about the reality a little bit more, is that you are living with other people, living on a comfortability scale. I believe Craig Kirlop, kind of king of house hacking among the BiggerPockets community, I think he coined that term. But you do have to think about a house hack as like this scale of being comfortable. Comfortable is live in my own house and have a room for yoga and then have another room for my own office and another room for guests. That would be so cool and so comfortable. And I would also be spending $3,000 for my mortgage every month, so I wouldn't be able to save. Opposite side of the spectrum is you're living with 4 other people. You're giving up your privacy. Although I'm pretty extroverted, there's some days I just don't necessarily feel like talking. So there are days that are better than others, right? And you're giving up some comfort for long-term gain. I really want to clarify to people that there are struggles to house hacking, but it's so worth it. I think if this is my second job or my part-time job where I'm making money for myself and working for myself.
So you've obviously taken a lot of golden nuggets from your first property. Can you tell me what you really learned from that first to the second transition where you're buying that first house hack, I'm moving out, I'm actively managing and then still looking for new tenants? I had a bit of a problem when I first moved out of my house. I had still 2 tenants there, and I decided to end both the leases and have 1 lease on the property and do a traditional long-term. The numbers still made sense for me, but for you, I'm not sure if you would have broken even or been negative, and you're cash flowing much more than I am, obviously, on this renting by room. So can you tell me what you learned from the renting by room strategy and how you turn that into your second property?
Great question. Just great questions in general. I have learned a lot, but what I will say is both my properties only work on rent by the room. It is worth noting that. In a heartbeat, I would switch to a single tenant on my first property if I could. I am not in the situation where I could right now. Just really quick example, mortgage is $3,100 on my first property. If I were to rent that property, I could probably get about $2,800-ish for the mortgage if I were renting it to a family. So you do the math. That's not including I guess the utilities would be on the tenant, but I would be losing money on the first property. And that's not even including property management or CapEx or maintenance or anything like that. So numbers only work on rent by the room. But what I have learned is I have to act more like a landlord than a tenant. I think that's my biggest takeaway, because in my first property, you get really excited. You're looking for people that you vibe with and that kind of fit well since you're also living in the property, and you tend to get buddy with people and then you start to feel like a tenant yourself. And then one thing goes wrong and you have to handle a conflict. And then you have to put your landlord hat on. And then there could be potential issues. Like, I think I found that my tenants didn't necessarily at first take me as seriously when there was something wrong because I felt more like a roommate. I would call them my roommates. So now I change all my language. I call them my tenants to their face. They're not my roommate, they're my tenant. So I just try to like still be friendly. I want to be a good landlord. That's my pride and joy. I want to take care of the properties and provide a really great living situation for people. But I also need to have the boss energy and be the landlord and, take it a little more seriously than just pretending I'm another roommate.
And did you feel that growth as like to become more of the landlord when you got into that second property and you got a little bit more detached from it? Or was it instances when you were living there that you were like, I need to start to put my foot down and really treat this more like a business than these are my friends paying rent?
Great question. And I know you've also experienced what I'm going to talk about or something similar. It's when an issue arose is when I was like, all right, now I need to be a landlord. I need to be a little more serious and not as laxed because a couple cancellations came about and everyone basically just thought they could cancel and get all their money back and leave and be fine as if nothing happened. And that's where I had to pull out the lease and kind of basically show them like, hey, this is what you signed. Unfortunately, this is the situation. Obviously, every landlord will have a little bit of a different rule and regulation when it comes to evictions or cancellations. But I had 3 cancellations and not because of the property. It makes me sound like I'm a terrible landlord with terrible properties, just like personal situations. One moving back to across the country. That is when I started to realize that I need to act more as a landlord. And this is a business because if someone cancels, I'm paying, right? Like it's either they're paying the rent they signed a lease for or I'm paying. And I don't want to pay. I don't want to pay a mortgage. So definitely that moment, I think, is when I really learned. And that transition all happened right when I bought the second property. So definitely remember sometimes when it rains, it pours. Sometimes things happen all at once and you have to handle things kind of like back to back to back. But don't worry, there's a silver lining. Things do get better. So just know that that will happen from time to time.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head that we got a little bit more calloused from our experiences, I believe. This is everything that's in writing, and that's where we're going to keep communication. And that's what I really had to keep pointing back to as well. And I think why your situation is a little bit more unique than mine is that if you have 1 or 2 of those instances, you have 3 other tenants that can potentially, keep you a little bit closer to that break even or mortgage point, which mitigates some of the stress. You're also managing those 3 tenants too, I know. But for me, I had basically everybody out, and that was just a, freak nightmare time. What am I going to do? And I turned over to property manager at that time because I knew I was going to be moving. So it certainly is, you have to have the expectation of things are going to go wrong. Things are going to hit the fan and you have to react in the right way. And I think that you have really, really grown, and you're obviously in your second property. So it's not a mistake that you've grown from that first one at all. Property 2, I hear you have a 6-bedroom now. So you thought, hey, I want one more roommate. Why the heck not? So, tell me what your numbers look like on property number 2 now.
Yeah, well, here's where leveraging other properties and balancing your books matters, in my opinion, because now that I have 2 properties, I base my numbers off of 2 properties. I do look at them individually, but long story short, I lose money on my second property. Now, I don't have to lose money. It's a 6-bedroom. I decided not to rent out a room because I want a guest room. I have friends and family come and visit, usually like every other month or even sometimes every month. So I want them to have a space to stay because having them sprawled out in my bedroom floor and on my living room couch when I have 4 other tenants, it's a lot. So I'm not renting one of those rooms. And because of that, I am losing about $500 a month on this property. The mortgage is about a little over $4,000. I rent each room for a little bit less in this house. I get about $885 for all of the rent, anywhere from $885 to $900-ish. I'm, let's call it, making, $3,500-ish per month, and the mortgage is $4,000, right? That's also not including bills and things like that. So if you're accounting for that, I'm actually losing probably more than $400 or more than $500 a month, maybe even $700 a month if we're including all the bills. But because I am making $1,000, give or take, on the other property, I think of this as, okay, I'm still cash flowing. Let's call it $300 on the generous side. So yeah, it really ranges, but I look at both properties together. I'm still making money. It's beyond breaking even, and I own 2 properties in the Denver metro. So that's a pretty good deal in my opinion.
I love the way you just closed that answer and the way you started, because I was literally just going to say the way that I analyze my properties, I'm also taking a hit on my second one. But for you, I'm owning 2 properties in Colorado and getting paid about $500 a month. There's not many, if any, people that I know that can say that, Danielle. So you're certainly in this amazing place right now, and it's not to knock property number two, but I look at it as portfolio analysis, and I think Dave Meyer hits the nail on the head with his Start with Strategy book that came out this year, where you analyze your portfolio. You know, if there's a bad one in there, if you have 10 properties, I think it's easier to pick that one out and, you know, replace it. For you and I, we have two. It's like, where are we going to go and put the money right now to get a better performance? So I'm totally with you there. I know I've thrown Rockstar, All-Star, speaker at BPCon at you. Now I want to hear where you're going this year and where you're going for the future. What are you looking for your next property? Because I know you're going to be moving out of this one. It's going to be cash flowing, and you're going to be hungry for that next opportunity. So what is that next opportunity for Danielle?
Yeah, so two things. So I decided this is the year I am paying off all my debt, not including houses, obviously. But I have little student loan, little car payment, debt that I want paid off. I've ran the numbers since before I started investing, and it made more sense for me to invest before paying off that debt because I had the cash. I could have paid it off and been done, but I wanted to get a couple properties under my belt first and then pay off the debt. And I'm really open and transparent with money. So it's about 20 grand of debt that I should be able to pay off this year. Next year is when I will probably start looking for another property after that debt is paid off, probably later next year. So I'm not going to super rush it, but as soon as I look for that next property, I'm going to be really transparent. I think I'm reaching the end of my house hacking career with the rent by the room strategy. I definitely want either some sort of mother-in-law suite, some sort of ADU, accessory dwelling unit, detached situation, or a duplex or a multifamily, something where I can have my own space.
So Danielle, one piece of advice that you could give a user right now that is listening to this and is, you know, in your shoes about 3-4 years ago, that was really thinking about getting into their first property and is looking for that first time home buyer program or first time to house hack. Can you give somebody, you know, that golden nugget of advice that you didn't get maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
My golden nugget is just get started. Sounds cliche. It sounds like there's a lot more weight to that response, but there's really not. If step one is go to a meetup and talk with people and start asking questions in your area of what, pricing looks like and where do people invest, I would say just take a step. So when I say get started, I don't mean go buy a house tomorrow. I just mean go buy a real estate book from BiggerPockets. Shameless plug. Go check out BiggerPockets and just look at what people are talking about. Go to meetups in your area. Make friends with people who are also in real estate, who are doing what you think you'd want to do. I think that's just a perfect step one. But then also don't overanalyze. A lot of people were talking about CapEx and maintenance and property management and this and that. I'm going to be honest with you. When I was running my numbers and analyzing, I would look at basic utility cost, basic mortgage, factor in maybe a few $100 for all those extra expenses, and I would call it a day. And I would just run the numbers based off, all right, this is what I know I can get for rent in my area. Do the research on Zillow, go to Facebook, look at what rooms are going for rent in your area that you want to purchase in, and did math. How many bedrooms are there? What's the mortgage? What's the expenses? Does it work? Or does it somewhat work? It doesn't have to be on the dot as far as like perfect, just that's what I did. I did not wait to be a professional in this area to get started. But once you buy one, you really start to understand how things work. Once you have a house, you're like, I guess I should get a lawnmower. I guess I should take care of the lawn if I don't want to pay someone. Oh, when it snows, I guess I need to clean up the snow. I'm from Florida. Did not even think of that. So you just learn the small nuances that you can't read in a book, and you can't just like Google search some things. You have to just do it. So just get started.
That's great advice. It's networking, and then you're gonna have to learn as you go. That is just the nature of reality in this business. Well, Danielle, this was so much fun, and I know that our audience can find you at local meetups in Denver, Colorado. But where can our audience find you after this video launches?
On BiggerPockets. If you guys want to hit me up there, message me, check out my profile. So I would love to connect.
Awesome. If you'd like to see more videos like Danielle's on how you got started, please like and subscribe to the BiggerPockets YouTube Rookie channel. My name is Noah Bacon, and have a great day.